Hello. Yeah, Northside baby, man. Y'all niggas can't get rid of me. I'm like cancer. You know what I mean? You can't get rid of the cancer, you know what I mean? I'm harder than all.
Nobody expected it to go this far, not after everything that had already happened. Because what started as messy relationship drama between Offset and CardiB has now spiraled into something way darker, way more dangerous, and possibly even criminal. We're talking about threats that didn't sound like jokes anymore. We're talking about a confrontation that insiders are calling completely out of control. And we're talking about a moment where Offset allegedly crossed a line that even his biggest supporters can't defend. But here's where it gets insane. Because the person at the center of all this chaos isn't just anybody. It's Stefon Diggs, the same man tied to Cardi's most controversial chapter, the same man Offset has been publicly targeting for months, and the same man who has stayed completely silent while everything around him exploded. Until now. According to multiple insider reports and clips that started circulating online, what went down behind the scenes was not just another social media rant, it was a direct escalation. A real-world confrontation that has people asking one terrifying question. Did Offset just take things too far, for real this time? Because sources are claiming there was yelling, there was aggression, and there may have even been physical contact. And if that's true, this isn't just entertainment drama anymore, this is something that could land him in serious legal trouble. And the timing? That's what makes this even worse. Because this all allegedly happened right when tensions were already at their peak, after the baby drama, after the DNA test controversy, after the leaked threats, and just days after Offset himself was caught in a situation that already had people worried about his safety. So now fans are split. Some are saying he's spiraling, completely losing control. Others are saying this was inevitable, that everything has been building to this moment. But one thing is clear. This isn't just another chapter in their messy story. This might be the moment everything finally breaks. And trust me, what happened next? Nobody saw it coming. To really understand how things got this messy, you have to go back to the beginning, because what we're watching right now didn't just happen overnight. This was years in the making, a slow-burning situation that kept getting worse every single time it looked like things might finally calm down. And at the center of it all? CardiB and Offset. From the outside, their relationship always looked like a movie, flashy, passionate, unpredictable. They got married in 2017, and almost instantly became one of the most talked about couples in the entire industry. Every move they made turned into headlines. Every argument became public. Every reconciliation felt like a spectacle. But behind all that, there was always tension. Because let's be real, this wasn't a smooth love story. It was explosive from the start. There were cheating allegations that never fully went away. There were public apologies, emotional breakdowns, and moments that felt way too personal to be happening in front of millions of people. Fans watched Offset crash Cardi's performance begging for forgiveness, watched Cardi go live trying to explain why she stayed, watched both of them try to convince the world, and maybe even themselves, that things were under control. But they weren't. Every time things seemed to settle, something else would come out. Another rumor. Another argument. Another moment that made people question whether this relationship was ever really stable to begin with. And the truth is, it probably wasn't. Because by the time we got to 2024, something had clearly shifted. Cardi wasn't reacting the same way anymore. She wasn't defending him like before. She wasn't going out of her way to clean up the situation. Instead, she looked exhausted. Like someone who had finally reached her limit. When she filed for divorce, she didn't do it with drama. She didn't come out accusing him of something new. She didn't even try to make it a big public fight. Instead, she said something that hit different. Sometimes you just get tired. That was it. No big scandal. No explosive reveal. Just, done. And that's what made it feel real. Because for once, it didn't look like another temporary breakup. It looked final. Like she had mentally checked out long before the paperwork was even filed. But here's where things get complicated. Because even though the divorce was filed, it wasn't finalized. And that one detail? That changed everything. Because while things were still legally tied between Cardi and Offset, a new name entered the picture. A name that would take this entire situation from messy to completely chaotic. Stefon Diggs. At first, people didn't take it seriously. It looked like a rebound. A distraction. Just another headline that would fade after a few weeks. But it didn't. Because the relationship moved fast. Really fast. Suddenly, Cardi wasn't just being seen with Diggs, she was publicly connected to him. Then came the announcement that nobody expected so soon. She was pregnant. And just like that, everything exploded again. Because now this wasn't just about a breakup anymore. This wasn't just about a messy relationship ending. This was about a new life being brought into a situation that was still legally tied to someone else. And that's where the confusion started. Because legally speaking, Cardi was still married to Offset. Which meant that when the baby was born, things weren't as simple as people thought they would be. Questions started flying everywhere. Who's the father? What does the law say? What happens next? And instead of things calming down, they got louder. Way louder. Because around this same time, Offset started becoming more and more vocal. At first, it was subtle, small comments, indirect posts, things that could be brushed off. But then it escalated. Instagram lives. Statements. Claims that didn't line up with what Cardi had said publicly. And suddenly, it felt like we were watching two completely different stories being told at the same time. On one side, Cardi was trying to move forward, trying to keep things as clean as possible, trying to protect her peace. On the other side, Offset looked like he wasn't ready to let go at all. And that's when the tension really started building. Because it wasn't just about feelings anymore. It started turning into something else. Control. Ego. And a growing sense that this situation wasn't going to end quietly. Then came the music. Because Offset didn't stay silent, he dropped tracks, he made references, he sent shots that were impossible to ignore. And even if he never said names directly, everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. And just when it seemed like that was the peak, the leaks started. Private conversations. Audio clips. Threats that didn't sound like they were meant for the public, but somehow ended up everywhere. And that's when people started getting uncomfortable. Because now it didn't feel like entertainment anymore. It felt real. Dangerously real. Meanwhile, Stefon Diggs stayed quiet. No response. No public statements. No back and forth. And that silence? It only made everything louder. Because while Offset was going live, while clips were circulating, while fans were picking sides, Diggs just watched. And that drove people crazy. Was he ignoring it? Was he waiting? Or did he know something nobody else did? But the biggest twist of all came when people realized this situation wasn't just emotional anymore. It was turning legal. Because behind the scenes, court filings were happening. Requests were being made. And things that were once just rumors were now being documented in ways that couldn't be ignored. And suddenly, this wasn't just a celebrity breakup. This was a full-blown situation with consequences. Real ones. And just when it felt like things couldn't get more intense, they did. Because what happened next? That's when everything truly went off the rails. And this is where everything stopped being just drama and started feeling like a full-blown explosion that nobody could control anymore. Because up until this point, people were still treating the situation like another messy celebrity breakup. Toxic? Yes. Public? Definitely. But still, contained. That illusion didn't last. Not even close. Because the moment Offset started going live, everything changed. And I mean everything. At first, it looked like the usual, emotional venting, late-night energy, the kind of unpredictable behavior fans had seen before. But this time, there was something different in his tone. Something more aggressive, more personal, more unfiltered than ever before. He wasn't just talking anymore. He was accusing. He was claiming things that instantly sent shockwaves across social media, saying that Stefan Diggs had cheated multiple times, not once, not twice, but over and over again. He claimed it happened while CardiB was pregnant. He claimed Cardi had been left alone, dealing with everything by herself. And then came the statement that made people pause. He said the baby looked like him. Not Diggs. Him. Now think about that for a second. Because this wasn't some random comment. This wasn't something you just say casually. This was a direct challenge, not just to Diggs, but to reality itself. And the way he said it? It wasn't joking. It wasn't playful. It was confident. Too confident. And that's when the internet went crazy. Clips started spreading everywhere. People slowed down the videos, analyzed his words, debated every sentence. Some fans believed him. Others thought he was spiraling. But either way, everybody was watching. Because it didn't stop there. Not even close. Because the more he talked, the more intense it got. He started predicting outcomes, saying that Diggs would end up paying insane amounts in child support. He talked like everything had already been decided, like he knew how the situation would play out before anyone else did. And then, it crossed the line. Because suddenly, the tone shifted from emotional to threatening. He started talking about what he would do if he ran into Diggs. Not in a joking way. Not in a, we'll settle this, kind of way. But in a way that made people uncomfortable. He referenced hurting him. Ending things. Even targeting his career, mentioning knees, mentioning damage, mentioning things that sounded way too specific to ignore. And here's the scary part. This wasn't the first time people had heard that kind of language. Because months earlier, there had already been a leak, an audio clip that surfaced online, allegedly featuring Offset speaking on a private call. And in that clip, the same kind of threats were made. The same tone. The same energy. The same words. At the time, people debated whether it was real. Some said it was edited. Some said it was taken out of context. But now? After those Instagram lives? There was no denying the pattern. Private threats had now become public statements. And that's when everything escalated fast. Because now it wasn't just fans reacting. Media outlets picked it up. Blogs started posting headlines. Reaction channels broke everything down second by second. And suddenly, what was once just Offset ranting online turned into something much bigger. A narrative. A dangerous one. Because now the story wasn't just about heartbreak or jealousy. It was about control. It was about obsession. And it was about how far someone might go when they feel like they're losing everything. Meanwhile, Stefan Diggs stayed completely silent. No response. No reaction. No acknowledgement. And somehow, that made things even worse. Because silence like that? It can either calm a situation, or it can make the other person even more frustrated. And in this case, it clearly did the second. Because the more Diggs stayed quiet, the louder Offset got. And then, something happened that nobody expected. Something that shifted the entire story again. Because just as all of this was unfolding, the lives, the accusations, the threats, news broke that Offset had been shot. Yeah, shot. Outside a casino. Let that sink in. Because the timing? It couldn't have been worse. One day, he's online making threats. The next, he's in the hospital. And instantly, the entire narrative flipped. People weren't just watching anymore, they were questioning everything. Was it connected? Was it random? Was it retaliation? Nobody had clear answers, but everyone had theories. And while all of that chaos was happening, while fans were trying to piece things together, while blogs were pushing updates every hour, there was one person everyone expected to react. CardiB. And when she finally did, it wasn't what people expected. Because instead of celebrating, instead of distancing herself, instead of staying completely silent, she showed concern. Real concern. Reports started circulating that she was one of the first people he contacted after the incident. That despite everything, the divorce, the drama, the public chaos, there was still a connection there. And that confused people. Because how do you move on, but still stay emotionally tied like that? How do you separate legally, but still show up when it matters most? And just when people thought that might calm things down, it didn't. Because Offset didn't disappear after the shooting. He didn't step back. He didn't go quiet. He went right back online. Posting. Talking. Acting like nothing had changed. And that's when people started saying the same thing. He's not stopping. Because at this point, it wasn't just about CardiB anymore. It wasn't just about Diggs anymore. It was about something bigger. A pattern. A cycle that kept repeating itself, getting louder, more intense, more dangerous every single time. And just when it felt like that was the peak. When it felt like things couldn't get any more out of control. The first real twist hit. Not on Instagram. Not in a song. But in court. Because while everyone was focused on the lives, the threats, the shooting, behind the scenes, Offset made a move that changed everything. He filed for DNA testing. Not just rumors. Not just claims. A legal request. With paperwork. With attorneys. With a judge involved. And suddenly, this wasn't just internet drama anymore. This was real. Because once something enters the legal system, it changes the game completely. And the details? That's what made it even crazier. He wasn't just questioning things publicly. He was officially challenging paternity. Turning everything he had been saying online into a legal argument. And when the document surfaced, the internet lost it. Because now, people weren't just speculating anymore. They were waiting. Waiting for results. Waiting for answers. Waiting for confirmation of something that could either prove him right, or completely destroy everything he had been claiming. But here's the twist. The court didn't give him everything he wanted. And that's where things take an even darker turn. And just when people thought the situation had already reached its peak, that the drama couldn't possibly get any louder, any messier, any more dangerous, that's exactly when everything escalated again. Because the moment the court documents became public, the entire narrative shifted overnight. We're talking headlines everywhere. We're talking fans dissecting legal language like detectives. We're talking a situation that went from celebrity chaos to something that felt way more serious. Because now, Offset wasn't just talking anymore. He had taken his claims into a courtroom. He had made it official. And that alone changed everything. But what the court decided, that's where the real shock hit. Because according to the filings that started circulating, the judge split the decision. One request was denied. The other? Granted. And instantly, confusion took over the internet. Because the biggest question everyone had been asking, the one that had fueled months of speculation, was about the newborn. The baby tied to Stefan Diggs. And when the ruling came down, that door was closed. No DNA test for the newborn. Just like that. Done. And that single decision? It hit like a bomb. Because if you've been watching this story from the beginning, you already know that was the claim Offset had been pushing the hardest. That was the narrative he built his entire argument around. The baby. The resemblance. The certainty. And now? The court wasn't even entertaining it. So what does that mean? Was it lack of evidence? Was it timing? Was it something deeper that the public doesn't even know yet? Nobody had clear answers, and that uncertainty made everything worse. Because instead of ending the speculation, it multiplied it. But here's where it gets even more twisted. Because while one door was slammed shut, another one was quietly opened. Because the court did approve DNA testing, just not for the baby everyone was talking about. It was for another child. And the details? Redacted. Hidden. Completely out of public view. Now think about how crazy that is for a second. Because now, instead of one question, there were TWO. One question that got shut down publicly. And another question that was now being investigated privately. And suddenly, the entire situation felt even more unstable. Because now it wasn't just about what people could see. It was about what they couldn't. And that's when the internet went into overdrive. Because fans started connecting dots, building theories, questioning timelines that didn't even seem questionable before. Everything became suspicious. Everything became a debate. And in the middle of all that chaos, CardiB finally started showing just how much this situation was affecting her. Not through statements. Not through press releases. But through moments that felt way too real to be staged. Concert clips started going viral, moments where she changed lyrics mid-performance, moments where she slipped up and mentioned names she clearly didn't want to say out loud, moments where you could see the frustration on her face before she even tried to hide it. And people noticed. Because this wasn't the same energy she had before. This wasn't controlled. This wasn't calculated. This looked like someone who was genuinely overwhelmed. And if you look closely, you can actually see the exact moment things started breaking through. At one show, she paused mid-line, caught herself, and made a face that said everything without saying a word. Confusion. Frustration. Exhaustion. And within minutes, that clip was everywhere. People weren't just talking about the drama anymore. They were talking about her. Her health. Her stress. Her situation. Because suddenly, it didn't feel like entertainment anymore. It felt heavy. But here's the part that nobody saw coming. While all of this was happening, the court rulings, the viral clips, the online chaos, something was quietly building in the background. Something that had nothing to do with Instagram. Nothing to do with music. Nothing to do with interviews. It was happening in real life. At casinos. Through debts. Through situations that didn't make headlines right away, but would soon become impossible to ignore. Because reports started resurfacing about Offset's gambling habits. Not just rumors. Specific incidents. Large amounts of money. Losses that weren't just casual, but serious. We're talking lawsuits being filed. We're talking credit lines. We're talking disputes over unpaid money. And suddenly, a new narrative started forming. Because now, people weren't just questioning his behavior online. They were questioning what was happening offline. And that's when things got dangerous. Because when money, ego, and public humiliation mix together, it doesn't stay contained. It spills over. And that's exactly what happened. Because behind the scenes, tensions were rising with people connected to those situations. Names started being mentioned. Stories started coming out. Claims of debts, claims of confrontations, claims of threats that weren't just directed at Diggs anymore. And then, it all came to a head. Because just days after those court rulings, just days after those viral clips, the situation turned physical. Again. But this time, it wasn't just rumors or leaks. It was an actual incident. The one that had already shocked everyone. The shooting. But here's the twist that nobody expected. That wasn't the moment that changed everything. The real shift came after. Because less than 48 hours later, footage surfaced. Clear. Recent. Undeniable. Footage that instantly reset the entire narrative. It showed Stefon Diggs walking into one of CardiB's shows, not hiding, not sneaking, but openly. Confidently. With his family. And then? It showed something even more shocking. After the show ended, after everything that had happened, after Offset was literally recovering, CardiB walked out, got into Diggs' car, and left with him. Just like that. No hesitation. No confusion. No distance. And when that footage hit the internet, everything exploded. Because now, the story had a visual. Not rumors. Not claims. Not accusations. Proof. And that single moment, it undid everything Offset had been trying to push. Because while he was online claiming control, while he was in court trying to prove a point, while he was making threats and predictions, she made a choice. A visible one. A public one. And it didn't involve him. And that's when people started asking the real question. After everything that's happened, after all the chaos, the threats, the legal battles, did this moment finally push Offset over the edge? Or was he already there? The moment that footage dropped, everything went from intense to completely out of control. Because now it wasn't just speculation anymore. It wasn't just, he said, she said. It was visible, clear, undeniable. And the internet? It lost it. Within minutes, clips of CardiB getting into Stefan Diggs' car were everywhere: TikTok, Instagram, X, YouTube, every platform you could think of. And the reactions? Completely divided. On one side, people were saying this was Cardi finally taking control of her life. They were posting things like, "She chose peace over chaos. After everything she's been through, she deserves this. He's been doing too much, she moved on." For them, this wasn't shocking, it was overdue. Because from their perspective, Offset had been spiraling for months. The lies, the threats, the constant public outbursts, it all painted a picture of someone who wasn't handling the situation well at all. And to them, this moment? This was the consequence. But then there was the other side. And they were not holding back. Because a whole different group of fans saw that footage and had a completely different reaction. They were saying, "This is disrespectful. He just got shot, and this is what she's doing. No matter what happened, the timing is crazy." And suddenly, the narrative flipped again. Because now, Cardi wasn't just being seen as someone moving on. She was being questioned, judged, analyzed from every angle. People started bringing up everything: the timeline, the breakup rumors, the alleged cheating on Diggs' side, the pregnancy, the court drama. All of it. And instead of calming things down, it made everything louder. Because now it wasn't just about Offset anymore. It was about all of them. A full-blown triangle where nobody looked completely innocent. And the debates? They got intense. We're talking full-on arguments in comment sections. Fan bases clashing. People picking sides like this was a battle. Some were defending Cardi. Some were defending Offset. Some were saying Diggs played it the smartest by staying silent the entire time. And that silence? It became a huge talking point. Because while Offset was going live, making statements, reacting emotionally, Stefan Diggs said nothing. No interviews. No social media posts addressing the situation. No public response to the threats. And for a lot of people, that made him look powerful. Calculated. Like someone who knew that saying less would actually say more. Industry insiders even started weighing in, not directly naming names, but making comments that clearly pointed at the situation. You had people in media circles saying things like, "Silence is a strategy. The loudest person in the room isn't always the one winning. Sometimes not reacting is the biggest reaction." And that hit. Because when you compare that to everything Offset had been doing, the contrast was impossible to ignore. One person reacting to everything. The other reacting to nothing. And somehow, the quiet one was gaining more respect. But it didn't stop there. Because then came the media coverage. Blogs, entertainment outlets, reaction channels, they all jumped on the story. And the headlines? They were brutal. Offset spirals after CardiB moves on. New footage raises questions about CardiB's relationship status. Stefon Diggs stays silent as drama explodes. Every outlet had a different angle. Some focused on Offset's behavior. Some focused on Cardi's choices. Some focused on Diggs' silence. But all of them had one thing in common. They kept the story alive. And the more it stayed alive, the more people dug into the past. Old clips resurfaced. Old arguments were replayed. Old interviews suddenly meant something new. It was like the internet was trying to rebuild the entire story from scratch, piece by piece, to figure out who was right and who was wrong. But here's the thing. Nobody could agree. Because every time someone made a strong point, someone else came in with a completely different perspective. Some said Offset was hurt and reacting emotionally. Others said he crossed the line and brought everything on himself. Some said Cardi was finally free. Others said her actions were messy and confusing. Some said Diggs was smart. Others said his silence was suspicious. It was chaos. And in the middle of all that chaos, there was one detail that kept coming up over and over again. The timing. Because no matter which side people were on, everyone agreed on one thing. The timing of that footage was wild. Because this didn't happen months later. It didn't happen after things settled down. It happened right in the middle of everything. Right after the threats. Right after the court drama. Right after the shooting. And that made it feel bigger. Heavier. Like a moment that meant more than just two people leaving a concert together. It felt like a statement. And statements? They always come with consequences. Because now the pressure was higher than ever. On all sides. People were watching every move. Waiting for the next reaction. Waiting to see who would break first. Would Offset respond again? Would Cardi address the backlash? Would Diggs finally speak? Or would everything just keep building until something even bigger happened? Because if there's one thing this situation has proven, it's that every time it looks like things can't get worse, they do. And what came next? That might be the most shocking part of the entire story. And just when it felt like the internet had seen everything. Every clip analyzed, every side taken, every theory debated. That's when the story took one last turn. The kind that makes you question everything you thought you understood. Because behind all the noise, the lives, the threats, the footage, the court drama, something was quietly developing that nobody was paying attention to at first. Until it was too late. Because while the public was focused on the chaos, Offset was making moves again. Not online. Not in music. But in a way that hit way harder than anything he had said before. See, most people thought the court situation had already played out, that the DNA decision, the filings, the drama, that was the peak. But insiders started hinting that there was more going on behind the scenes. More paperwork. More discussions. More pressure being applied in ways the public couldn't fully see. And then, small details started leaking. Nothing huge at first. Just whispers. Mentions of new requests, changes in legal positioning, things that suggested this situation wasn't slowing down at all. It was escalating, quietly. And that's when fans started noticing something strange. Because while everyone expected CardiB to finally address everything directly, she didn't. She didn't go live. She didn't post a long explanation. She didn't clear anything up. Instead, she moved differently. Subtly. Carefully. And if you were paying attention, you could see it. Fewer reactions. More controlled appearances. Moments where it felt like she was holding something back, something she wasn't ready to say publicly yet. And that only made people more curious. Because silence in a situation like this? It usually means one of two things. Either everything is finally calming down, or something bigger is coming. But here's where it gets even crazier. Because just as that tension was building, just as people were waiting for the next move. Another clip started circulating. Not from a concert. Not from paparazzi. But from someone close to the situation. A short, unclear video, voices in the background, raised tones, a moment that looked like it could be nothing, or everything. And the internet? It ran with it instantly. Because people started claiming that this was the moment, the confrontation, the incident that had been rumored for days. The one involving Stefon Diggs. The one where things allegedly got physical. Now here's the truth. Nobody has confirmed exactly what happened in that moment. No official statements. No clear footage. Just fragments. Just noise. Just enough to keep the story alive, but not enough to settle it. And somehow, that made it even more intense. Because now people weren't just reacting to what they saw. They were reacting to what they think happened. And that's where things get dangerous. Because speculation turned into assumptions. Assumptions turned into narratives. And narratives started spreading faster than facts. Some people are convinced that Offset actually confronted Diggs. Others say it never happened, that it's just another rumor blown out of proportion. But the fact that people are even debating it, that alone says everything about how far this situation has gone. Because think about it. A few months ago, this was just relationship drama. Now, people are talking about confrontations. Legal consequences. Real-world consequences that go way beyond social media. And through all of this, Stefon Diggs is still silent. No denial. No confirmation. Nothing. And that silence? It's starting to feel louder than ever. Because now it's not just strategic. It's mysterious. Like he knows something. Like he's waiting for something. Or maybe, like he doesn't need to say anything at all. Meanwhile, Offset? He hasn't slowed down. If anything, people are saying he's becoming more unpredictable. More reactive. More willing to say and do things that could have serious consequences. And that's where the real concern is coming from now. Not just fans, but people in the industry too. Because at this point, it's not just about reputation. It's about what happens next. Will this stay online? Or will it spill over again, into real life? Because if there's one thing this story has proven over and over again, it's that every time things seem like they might settle, they don't. They escalate. And right now, everything feels like it's building towards something. Something bigger. Something that hasn't happened yet, but feels like it could at any moment. Because the truth is, the divorce still isn't finalized. The legal questions aren't fully answered. The tension between these three? Still unresolved. And the biggest question of all? Still hanging in the air. What really happened in that moment everyone's talking about? Was it just another rumor? Or was it the moment everything finally crossed the line? Because if it was real, then this story? It's far from over. In fact, it might just be getting started. So now I've got to ask you. After everything you just saw, the drama, the threats, the court filings, the footage, and that mysterious moment everyone is still debating, what do you actually think is going on here? Do you believe Offset really crossed the line this time? Or do you think this whole situation has been blown way out of proportion by the internet? And what about CardiB? Do you think she's finally moving on and choosing peace? Or does that footage with Stefon Diggs raise even more questions than answers? Because let's be real. Nothing about this situation feels simple anymore. Every new clip, every new leak, every new rumor. It just keeps adding another layer to a story that refuses to end. And that's exactly why I need you in the comments right now. White down pointing back hand index. White right pointing back hand index. Who do you think is telling the truth? White right pointing back hand index. Who's actually in the wrong here? White right pointing back hand index. And do you think this situation is about to get even worse? Don't hold back, I want to see real opinions, real debates, real takes. Because trust me, this isn't the last update. Not even close. There are still unanswered questions. There are still things happening behind the scenes. And if even half of what insiders are hinting at is true, the next part of this story? It's going to shock everyone. So make sure you hit like if you want more updates like this. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And stay locked in. Because the moment something new drops, you already know we're breaking it down right here.